Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Inside the Aisle. I'm your host, Nikki Wolfe, and today we have our lovely returning guest to the show, Shelby Smith. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. Happy to be back.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you here. Today's episode is going to look a little bit different. We are truly jumping inside the aisle, and we're going to talk about some ingredients that maybe you might not necessarily be familiar with. You might have heard about some of them, but we're really going to take one formula, dissect it, and get all inside of it. But before we do that, so today we're going to talk all about digestion. And before we get to the individual ingredients, Shelby, would you mind kind of just giving us a brief summary of the digestive system and how it works?
Yeah, absolutely. So the digestive system is a complex system in our body. There's a lot to be said. It involves multiple organs and body parts that are functioning often. They're functioning all the time to make sure that we are converting our food into energy. So it's super, super cool. There's a lot to be said, but I think the first thing to acknowledge when we're talking about digestion is that digestion actually starts in our mouth. So where we started off in this process is talking about the mouth. So when we eat food, whether we're chewing gum, we're drinking a drink, or consuming food, saliva is going to be that first step of the digestion process. Saliva contains enzymes that begin to break down the food that we're eating. It contains enzymes that breaks down the starches in our food so that we can start to process it. And then the digestive system is going to go throughout the rest of the body, where our food's going to go down our esophagus and into our stomach, where the acid in our stomach is going to continue the digestion process because that has already started in our mouth. But with all of that being said, there's a lot that we can talk about when we're talking about supplementation. We can talk about diet. We can talk about lifestyle. There's even tips for how to best eat. You chew your food 30 times so that you're getting enough saliva.
We really do that?
I know.
I think the last time I was with you, I think you chew your food quite a bit, which is good.
I do, only because I've noticed a big difference. I used to not be somebody who chewed my food very much, and when I had heard that the first time that you need to chew your food like 30 times, I was like, that is so many times, and it made me realize how much I wasn't chewing my food. So I do chew my food a lot now. You're very right.
All right, challenge to everyone listening. We got to chew our food. Maybe 30 is a bit excessive
30's a lot.
if we're going 0 to hero, but we can kind of boost it up a little bit.
Yes.
So I'll start working on that. And it's interesting because I've always read, like when I was raw vegan, and I mean, I don't know what that necessarily has to do with it, but I just remember this being said is chew your liquids and drink your food, meaning like make juices and smoothies so that all this food like you can consume in liquid form. But then also when you are having the liquid, even if it's just liquid, you don't need to chew it, to actually make that motion. Yes, that mechanical or physical motion is going to secrete some of that saliva, which contains the enzymes to break down those starches. And so if you're drinking something, I don't know if it works like this, but if you're having a smoothie or something, see if you can chew a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that can really go into a whole conversation about saliva, which we don't have to get into today, but chewing your drinks, chewing your smoothie can help to activate those enzymes that your body's naturally producing, your body needs to break down the food. And I do think it's interesting because as I've mentioned that exact thing to people, sometimes people will say, oh, I have noticed that smoothies sometimes upset my stomach, or, I don't digest smoothies very well. I never knew why. People often think it's the sugar associated, which could definitely be a factor. But are you chewing it? Are you creating those enzymes through your saliva? It's a very important question to ask. So, no, I love to talk about that.
Well, and if you are, having a smoothie and maybe you have some sort of digestive comfort or discomfort, we have a solution for you. And that's what we're going to spend our time today talking about is Life Seasons formula digestivity. So this is our enzyme and probiotic support. And so this is a really good formula to get in the system prior to eating meals, to aid your body in this digestive support so that everything kind of goes the way it should be. And then you don't end up with this, stomach ache or anything like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So we can dive into this formula. It's something that I find myself saying a lot, but I just really mean about this one. I love this formula so much. This was one of the first formulas I tried from Life Seasons, and I had tried probiotics my whole life, through fermented foods, through different methods, but I have never in my life had such quick results from a probiotic as when I tried digestivity. So I do have it here if you can hear me shaking it around.
ASMR.
Yeah, some ASMR. But I love this formula. So we can kind of go through the ingredients. I'll read them all and then we can break down some maybe our favorites. A little pun there, break them down. So there is Seb gluten relief. There's Digeseb enzyme blend. There's 150 milligrams of bromelain, and there is 75 milligrams of papain. There is chamomile, there's beetroot, there's fennel seed, we've got ginger in here, nettle leaf, and of course a probiotic blend of some different forms of probiotic, but mostly lactobacillus, which we can talk about more in depth.
Yes.
But through that ingredient list, what stands out to you, Nikki? What do you acknowledge most?
Yeah, great question. So there's quite a few things. Right away, I love that we create a gluten relief formula in there. So many people nowadays, whether they're celiac or gluten intolerant, really could use that extra support with enzymes that are going to be designed to break down that gluten. So my mom has celiac disease, meaning it's not just, discomfort when you have gluten, it actually harms the body. And so she goes above and beyond to make sure that there's no gluten coming in, no cross-contamination. However, even if you're going to a restaurant that is strictly we're gluten-free or, we make it in a separate pan or whatnot, there's always a slight chance of some sort of cross-contamination. So she likes to take this beforehand to make sure and give her body those ingredients in case there's anything that slips on by. So I love that we do put that gluten relief in there. And one of my other things, to mention. So chamomile in here, and we generally recognize chamomile for its calming, relaxing components, and you find it in sleep formulas and anxiety formulas. So you're like, why in the world would we put it in a digestive formula? And so what that brings me to, and this is where we put our science cap on, is there's two different nervous systems in the body. There's the parasympathetic nervous system and the sympathetic. So parasympathetic is going to be your rest and digest. So in order to be able to digest food and calm your body down, you have to be in that parasympathetic nervous system. Now, if you are in the middle of the wilderness and a lion's chasing you, you don't want to be in parasympathetic nervous system. You want that blood going straight to your legs so you can sprint away. You want your, pupils dilated so that you can be aware of everything going on. So your body will naturally shift into the sympathetic nervous system. The problem is our day and age, we are so triggered and constantly being pulled into the sympathetic nervous system. We're driving in the car and someone, cuts us off and, all these different reactions happen, or a kid runs in and drops a plate, and just so many different things are happening that all day long we are continuously in the sympathetic nervous system. And we're not, I've talked about this or spoken about this a few times, but we're not allowing our bodies enough silence and solitude to be able to convert us into that parasympathetic nervous system. So with all that being said, chamomile helps us transfer from the sympathetic nervous system to the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's why it's important. Let's say, you're eating dinner and your kid walks in and some sort of calamity happens. Once that's cleaned up, give yourself a little bit of a breather before you dive back into your food. Maybe it's just 5 minutes of just deep breathing or whatever you can manage in that situation so that we can make sure to get into the right nervous system so we have the ability to break down and digest food instead of, stimulating glucose, relaxing your airwaves and, secreting adrenaline. We really want to make sure that we can kind of slow that heartbeat and be able to properly digest our food.
No, absolutely. And I think that really moves the conversation to somewhere else I wanted to talk about, which is our gut-brain connection. And there is a lot that we could say about this. I don't know, do we have 5 hours to talk about the gut-brain connection? Because there's so much to say. But I will say that within our gut, we have serotonin receptors, which serotonin is one of those happy chemicals. And when our gut microbiome is off, we're going to feel that in other areas. We're not just going to feel that as, as we might expect in the digestive system. That doesn't mean you're going to automatically be constipated or have too many bowel movements. That can really manifest through our stress levels. That's going to manifest through our skin and breakouts and all sorts of things that our body might be trying to tell us that our digestion system is out of whack. There's a lot of ways that our bodies can communicate that. And I think chamomile is such a brilliant addition in this formula because it is helping to address that gut brain connection. So I love that you're talking about all of that. It's so important.
Absolutely. I think the gut to brain connection is so prevalent, and it's just, I mean, it's interesting because when I went through a lot of like mental things a few years ago, boy, would I wish I would have known, or actually I think it was the reverse. I went through a lot of gut issues, and then a few years later, this went, off the deep end. And I'm like, I wish we could warn people that, if you're going through a digestive storm, or if you're going through like a mental, emotional storm, be aware that the opposite might be coming next. So to prime your body and prep it for everything that it needs, because that connection is so deeply rooted that chances are you are going to feel kind of the offset of whether it's digestive or emotional.
Yeah, absolutely.
issues.
Absolutely. And I think of it more as a cycle, right? If your gut health is off, that's going to impact your stress. But the same is true if your stress levels are really high, like you were saying, it's going to continue to impact our gut health. And that can be a really vicious cycle. And so addressing these root causes is so important. So I love that there's chamomile in here to really, really address that. And then I'll also just say, I think I mentioned anxiety every time you have me on the podcast, but digestivity or a probiotic is such a good addition for somebody looking for a stress support formula for that reason. Odds are, if they're coming in needing extra help responding to stress, they're probably going to need a little bit of extra help in the gut category as well. So digestivity is the perfect solution for that. But let's kind of go back into the ingredients. I kind of got off on a tangent there. My favorite thing about digestivity personally that I've noticed is that digestivity helps so much with bloating. So there's a bunch of ingredients in here that really help with that. Anywhere from the fennel seed to the chamomile is also really helpful for bloating. But regardless of when you have bloating, whether it's in the morning or at night, if that's something you're struggling with, I recommend digestivity forever. It is so helpful in reducing bloating. Have you experienced that at all?
So I guess that's a two different thing. I ended up getting diagnosed with like H. pylori, C. diff, SIBO, all those different things. So my bloating was caused from something else, which actually is a really good, like maybe we do a separate episode on that, because that's a whole other category of bloating. So I did notice like slight differences, but mine was to such an extended degree that I needed like a very deep protocol for that.
I see.
But I know so many people that have used this. If they have more acute bloating, like if I eat this, my stomach hurts, but if it's an everyday chronic bloating where it's like I drink water and I'm bloated or anything like that, that's more of like a deeper rooted issue. And that's where, the C. diff, H. pylori, SIBO. And again, listeners, if you're hearing it, if that's something that interests you, let us know. Because we could do, a conversation on that, because we do have a formula designed for irritable bowel and supporting, that discomfort. But absolutely, I've heard so many people get that support with their bloating in there.
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that. Just to jump in, of course, if this is a long-term bloating issue, you're experiencing that for a long time, definitely work with a healthcare partner to, figure out the best route for yourself. But that short-term acute bloating, I notice when I eat bread, it makes me bloated, especially bread, or, I have dairy and I had that cup of ice cream and now I'm feeling so bloated. Digestivity is that's the perfect time to take it.
Totally. Would absolutely agree to that. That's more of that acute support. Like beans don't really sit well, or this doesn't sit well. It is going to be so helpful.
Yes.
I'm glad you mentioned that. One other ingredient I love in here is Saccharomyces boulardii. So that is a probiotic strain. Generally, it's sold on its own. It's not in formulations because it's generally hard to encapsulate with other ingredients. And this probiotic is really good for like traveler's diarrhea, bowel irritability. So if you are traveling somewhere like another country with very different types of food, and if you tend to get sick when you're not eating your normal food, this is going to be the perfect formula for you because of that addition of the Saccharomyces boulardii in there.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Another time that I think is really important to take Saccharomyces boulardii is going to be after maybe you've taken an antibacterial or an antibiotic. Antibiotics are going to come into the body and they're going to get rid of all bacteria, which is what they're, right? They live up to the name. And so if you don't know, in our gut, we have good and bad bacteria. Really throughout our entire body, there's good and bad bacteria. And Saccharomyces boulardii is one of those good bacteria. We need it in order to digest our food. But unfortunately, antibiotics can kill that good bacteria as well. So if you have recently taken an antibiotic, you've taken one in the past, supplementing a form of bacteria that's good, that's helpful, like Saccharomyces boulardii, can be so helpful in restoring that. So I wanted to mention that. But Saccharomyces boulardii is so cool. Like you mentioned, it's really good for acute diarrhea, if you're traveler's diarrhea. So, if you're experiencing that. But that is also to be said that if you're not experiencing diarrhea and you're still having digestive upset, digestivity can still be a great formula for you. It doesn't have to just be that you're experiencing diarrhea in order to take this formula.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's so many ingredients in this formula that are such a powerhouse, and that's why I know you're always very excited about this. And you take it in the evening.
I do take this formula every single day. This is part of my nighttime trio, as I've been calling it. So I do take 3 digestivity after dinner. I feel like personally in my body, I eat my biggest meal at dinner time. So I think that's part of it, but I do a lot of digesting at night. And so we all do. And so I do like to take it once I finish dinner, along with anxiety, again, that gut brain connection. And I also take it with one of our sleep formulas, Resi or Sleep Now, depending on my mood. So those are kind of my triple threat, and I've been sleeping so well. My energy's been great. So no caffeine in me today, and I'm all energized. So.
Well, I can tell that today, and I did not sleep well last night, so I am like, what? But you are showing up and you're here and you clearly did sleep good last night.
Yes, well, I credit it to my trio, but yeah, I like taking this one at night, but I will just also say that there is a lot of ways that people take this. You do not have to take it at night. Don't let the chamomile make you think it's going to make you drowsy. That is absolutely not true. You can take one with each meal. You can take them all with lunch. You can take them all with breakfast. Like I said, I like to take them all after dinner. That's totally up to you. The recommended serving size is 3 a day. So my recommendation is make sure you're getting those 3 a day, however it makes the most sense for you, whenever that timing is right.
Perfect. Another ingredient that really stood out is bromelain, because bromelain we use in this formula and we use in another formula, which we can touch upon. But bromelain is going to be an enzyme that's naturally found in pineapple. And so that's going to be really supportive for digestion. And when you have this on an empty stomach, it's, again, going to aid in that digestion. Now, we put this in another formula, and that's going to be our allergy formula. And Shelby, any insight on why we put that in there, or kind of what we're doing with that?
Yeah, so bromelain's found in a few of our formulas for a few different reasons. Bromelain's really cool, and I like to imagine it, if you cook with pineapple, if you ever use it in cooking as like a marinade, you know that those enzymes from the pineapple are going to help break down the food, right? So it's often used in marinades for that very reason. And so it's kind of the same thing. We include it in digestivity, we include it in BreatheX, we also have it in Inflamex, because those enzymes are really good at breaking down what doesn't belong. So they can break down food to help our body push that out and eliminate the way it needs to. But bromelaine's also really good at breaking down inflammation. So if you're inflamed, whether that's in your sinuses, in your joints, wherever it might be, bromelain can help to break that down. So it's a super, super cool ingredient.
I love that. Perfect. I love that you mentioned that. So, and the fact that we have it in 3 different formulas. And again, that's the beauty of natural ingredients and herbs, is they don't just have one, way that they support. They can support in a number of different areas.
Absolutely. So. And what I love that you mentioned that, and this is just something I'm so passionate about, is that when you take a formula like digestivity, you're taking it with a goal in mind of digestion health, right? That's what most people are going to approach. But there's so many other benefits that people see when they take this. So a lot of people do notice that they feel less inflammation in their body when they take digestivity or BreatheX. And that's because a lot of these ingredients are doing multiple things. So You might notice that it's helping your stress levels. You might notice that it's helping you have a little bit more energy. So there's a lot of things that people notice just because these ingredients are so smart and they work so well in our bodies.
Love it. I'm curious if you've ever heard this, and I'm like in pregnancy brain. I'm wondering if I'm switching it. But the difference between certain probiotics, so there's the bifidum bacterium and then like the lactobacillus, and which one is more supportive for the small intestines and the large intestines. I don't know if you've ever heard of this, but somebody once told me that the bifidobacterium is more for the big, large intestines, where the lactobacillus is more supportive for the little small intestines. You ever heard of that before?
have heard that, and I will just say, in the sense of, should I take both forms of probiotic? Why would I want both? I think that there is a lot of truth to, different forms of these bacteria are going to do different things in our body, right? So it would make sense that they work best in different parts of the body as well. But something else to keep in mind is that in order to have a healthy gut microbiome, we need diversity. We need bacteria diversity. So that's why experts are going to recommend that not only do you take a form of lactobacillus and bifidobacterium and Saccharomyces boulardii, but they're also going to recommend that you eat yogurt and that you have some sauerkraut here and there, have a little bit of kimchi, drink a probiotic drink like Inner Eco, try different things that are going to give your gut diversity. And that's kind of one of my other recommendations that I was going to kind of throw out at the end is if you've been taking digestivity and I'm just going to be honest, if you've been taking it for months, try a different one for a month. Go switch it up, try a different form, and come back in a couple of months and get that diversity in your gut, because that's how you're going to probably notice the best results you can for your gut. But all of that to answer your question, yes, absolutely. Lactobacillus and bifidobacteria are going to respond differently in our body, and that diversity is good. We need that. That's going to give us the best way to break down our food.
Couldn't agree more. And not just the diversity of the individual probiotics, but even like looking at the count of the probiotics. Like there's so many different things to consider. But again, pressing into what you just said is making sure that you're getting a spectrum. If you've been doing a probiotic for, quite some time, switch it up, mix it up, look in the department, see what's on sale, try that out. There's so many good options out there. And Inner Eco, I love it. I take it every day. I know that most of you guys know I'm in a clinical study and for pregnant women, and my category is high fermented foods. So I have to do 6 servings of fermented foods a day. And so Inner Eco is just such an easy way to get that in. But I don't know if you've ever done this, to make your own yogurt.
With coconut yogurt. I haven't tried it, but I've seen that they make it with Inner Eco. It looks so yummy.
So fun. Yeah, so side tangent, I live in LA, and I would actually get up at like 3 a.m. and go drive down to, I don't know what it's called, but where grocery stores purchase their food, I would go down there because anybody can do it. You just kind of have to know the inside secret. And I would buy flats of coconuts for super cheap, crack them, bottle them, scoop it out, blend that with a little bit of, I dump in the Inner Eco at the end, and it's going to naturally ferment. And then I'm having like fermented coconut yogurt.
That sounds so yummy. Oh my gosh. So this is, I mean, no matter what health condition we're talking about, I'm always going to throw out, dietary recommendations. But in my humble opinion, the probiotic conversation is the funnest food conversation, because fermented foods, in my opinion, are so delicious and so fun. And there's so much versatility in that realm. There's so many different kinds of fermented foods. So if you weren't a fan of sauerkraut, try something else, because there's so many good probiotics out there that can help to diversify your gut. But with that being said, I know, Nikki, you've mentioned before, and you just mentioned that you're doing that study to eat a lot of fermented foods, and it's hard. It's hard to get enough fermented food just through food. So supplementing it is really important, because I know personally I'm not eating enough kimchi every single day to justify not supplementing it. So it really can be so beneficial. And again, that diversity is key.
I love that you mentioned that. And kind of one lasting thing to touch upon is that this formulation is shelf stable. So it
Yes.
doesn't need to be refrigerated. I love that that is accessible. You can refrigerate it if you want, but it's something that is just a little bit more accessible for people if you want to keep it at your, desk at work or wherever. It's just much more appropriate.
Absolutely. I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because that makes it really, really helpful for when you're traveling. You do not have to store this in the fridge. It's absolutely shelf stable. And what's cool, just a fun little fact, is Life Seasons actually does a lot of testing on our formulas. So we test when we receive ingredients. We test those ingredients throughout the process of making the formula. We also test the finished formula, but we even go a step beyond that. And we've actually tested digestivity multiple times from pulling it on the shelves. We pull it from the shelves near its expiration date and test it to make sure that everything that we say is on the label is in there, and it always matches. So this is a shelf-stable formula. It's awesome. I know there's a lot of questions about the probiotics once they're shelf-stable, but you don't have to store it in the fridge. No cooler necessary.
Totally. Absolutely. Well, before we wrap up, any lasting ingredients, any lasting thoughts that you'd love to leave our listeners with about this formula?
I will just say that if you're thinking about trying this one, if somebody comes to mind as somebody, your friend, your mom, your sister, whatever, you think they might benefit from this formula, I say try it. Life Seasons has a 90-day guarantee on all of our products, whether you buy it online or in store. So go give it a try, see how it responds in your body, see how your gut responds to this diversity of probiotics and this blend, and definitely let us know what you think. We love hearing reviews. We love hearing how people experience the formulas.
Absolutely. Well, it is always a pleasure, Shelby. Thank you so much for joining us on the episode today. I know not just myself, but others love hearing you and your insight and your wisdom and what you bring to the table. So we so appreciate it, and we look forward to hearing you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Take care.